So what is DevOps? At its simplest, the word is pretty obvious. It's the dev from development, and it's op from operations, and it's more than one thing, so there's an S on the end. So DevOps is, at its simplest, development and operations put together. And the term was invented by a man called Patrick Dubois, and that's him there smiling in the picture, a Belgian who made the phrase up in 2007. I could do a lot more about the history of where Patrick was coming from. I've not met the man personally, but we do follow each other on Twitter, and he talks a lot of common sense. He also talks a lot of clever technical stuff that I don't pretend to understand, but he's the man that came up with the word. And what we're going to do in DevOps is focus on the mechanisms, the culture, the attitudes involved. We can talk about technology and the tools and the practices, and of course they're all important. But what makes DevOps work is basing what we do on an empowered team responsible for the whole life cycle. So we're saying that at its most pure, as it were, we have one team who will help identify the need, develop the solution, build that solution, implement it, and then maintain it afterwards. Now, we're not saying, and there's nowhere in any of the stuff where we say that, okay, you have to create a team of 8 people and they have to stay together for the whole run. Of course, this is all dynamic. You would emphasize the skills of development early in the team. You would emphasize the skills of support, and we'll talk about how those are separate in a moment. And the team will be fluid and change, just like any football team, and I'm going to talk quite a bit about football in a moment as an analogy. So we're not talking about one set group of people that have to do it, but we are talking about continuity. And it very much balances the idea of product ownership. Saying to a team of people, I want you to build me something that does this. And then you let them go off and build it and run it and maintain it and keep delivering it and improving it as you go forward. That's probably one of the important terms. So this idea of giving people one element of the services you provide and giving them effective ownership of it is probably at the core of making these ideas work. And as I mentioned, it's recognizing that development and operations are all aspects of one thing. We see it in everyday life, or if you think about some obvious things, how sensible would it be to design and build an aeroplane without ever getting the opinions of a pilot? How sensible would it be to develop medicines and surgical techniques without involving and getting the opinions of doctors and surgeons? Of course, we would not do that. You wouldn't decorate your child's bedroom without asking them, because life would not be worth living afterwards. And it's really just taking that simple, obvious concept and applying it to our environment of saying, if you look at the traditional silos that we have unfortunately built in IT, then you realize that if somebody designs something and then somebody puts it in through, if we use the ITIL terms, service transition, and then into service operations to run it, if design get it wrong, the next team down the line will discover that they got it wrong. If you ask them before they build it, is this a good idea? The chances are you won't get it wrong. So it's involving people across the life cycle has always been a good idea. I said, Patrick Dubois came up with the term in 2007, but in the ITIL version 3 books that came out in 2007 and were written before he came up with that term, there is a page and a half that talks about how you would expect people to be involved across the life cycle, how you would want, for example, your operations people may spend 25% of their time working with a development team, how your transition people might spend some of their time involved in design, how you want your operations people actually involved in transition. And when you read that now, it sounds like an advert for DevOps. And that was, I think, the last thing written for the I2V3 books, when there was this horrible realization that we'd perhaps written something that was advocating new silos. And we wanted to make it absolutely clear that this was hopefully about breaking down silos. I'm not sure that we were totally successful in that. And as you may have gathered from what I'm saying, I know those words are in the article because I wrote those words. It cared to me at the time. I cared about it at the time, and I care about it now. But I can hang this word called DevOps on it thanks to Patrick.